We have a very interesting and challenging study in front of us because, of course, we're going to be dealing with something that's very important to us in terms of our future, but it's coming from a section of Scripture that has not been easy to understand. And we're going to see that we are a very privileged people who have had brethren like Brother Sully, who have been able to unwind under the hand of God this difficult part of Scripture. But we're going to open by looking initially at the land and the reforming of that land, the revitalisation of that land, and its reshaping to what it will be in the future and our inheritance in it, along with our children. That's where we're going to start in this series. And then in our second study, a little later on today, God willing, we'll have a look at some of the architectural details and the size and shape of the house of prayer for all nations. But then we're going to spend most of our time talking about what we will be doing and what people will be doing in that house. So then, let's start though with the importance of a vision. Proverbs chapter 29 verse 18, of course, is pretty well known amongst us, but it's also very important. It's the passage which speaks of the necessity of a vision. Where there is no vision, now the word vision here, chazaon in the Hebrew, means mental sight, from chazar, to gaze at, mentally to perceive, therefore to contemplate with pleasure, to have a vision of something. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And of course the translations say that could be rendered differently. The word in the Hebrew for perish, para, means to loosen, to expose, to dismiss. Rotherham says a people is let loose. Young's literal says, without a vision is a people made naked. And of course we're reminded of Revelation 16 and verse 15, where our Lord Jesus Christ says that we should hold on to our garments, keep our garments, lest we be found naked at his coming. We don't want to be found spiritually naked. Well, the answer to that is to have a very clear vision of the future. And of course, 85% of the Bible is really prophecy about the future. And so we need to look at it in that way. And we're going to see some wonderful things in this study of this section of Ezekiel's prophecy from chapter 40 to 48. So what kind of vision can this study create? Well, I'm going to show you about a 3-minute movie of the temple. Now, what I'd like you to do, if you can, is to let everything else go. Imagine that you are there in the kingdom age, that the temple is complete, that you are there, hopefully, as one of the immortal priests in this temple, and this is you watching the worshippers come into this place on the north side of the house. Just try and imagine that. So for another 3 minutes or so, we're going to take you there, and then we're going to come back and deal with the detail. indeed, what a privilege it will be, brothers and sisters, to serve in that house. It's not that far away from becoming a reality. If Christ comes when we expect him to come, and we know that that's going to be pretty soon, that's just 50 years away. 50 years to the reality of these things. And you and I will have been immortal for close on 50 years by the time that this house is open for worship. So we're looking for that transformation of nature, which we know will be given to the faithful. They will become the cherubim, the vehicles of Yahweh's judgments in the earth. They will do all the things required to establish the kingdom of God over a period of 40 years. And then, brothers and sisters, they will take up their role in this house. We want to have a look at our role in this house, see where we fit into the scheme of things. We want to learn the lessons of this house. So that's the point of our study here on a house of prayer for all nations. But let's have a look at the way that this land is going to be reshaped. We have some prophecies that are very clear about this. We have the prophecy of Joel chapter 3 and verse 2, which speaks of the time when Yahweh will gather all of the nations against Jerusalem to battle. They'll be brought into a place called the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the judgment of Yah. There he will judge them for what they have done to his people and his heritage Israel, whom they've scattered among the nations. And we know, of course, that this is the Valley of Jehoshaphat here. It runs up past Jerusalem, called Kidron Valley, of course, in other accounts. This is that place of divine judgment where the Gogian Confederacy will be destroyed largely in the land. And even ancient maps will show this. You see, they've got the Valley of Jehoshaphat here. This is Jerusalem. And there, of course, is the temple site. Here is the Valley of Jehoshaphat. So this is the place where the great earthquake will occur. And we're going to have a look at that from Zechariah chapter 14. Zechariah 14 verse 5 says, "And ye shall flee not to, but from the valley of the mountains. For the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azal," or as that Azal means, shall reach very near. Very near what? Well, the exalted Mount Zion is the subject of the following verses in Zechariah chapter 14. "Yea, ye shall flee like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah king of Judah, and Yahweh my God shall come, and all the saints with him." So here is Yahweh Elohim, he who will become mighty ones, revealed in those called saints here, the holy ones, as Rotherham puts it, the glorified saints with him as the cherubim of divine judgment to bring these things to pass. And of course we know that this is the subject of many, many scriptures. Revelation chapter 10, the rainbowed angel and his triumph, illustrates all of these things in a wonderfully presented imagery of an angel, a mighty angel surrounded by a cloud, the symbol of a multitude. He has, of course, the sun shining from his face because he is the Son of Righteousness. And there he has a rainbow above his head. So he's at the end of a career of 40 years of conflict. He has placed his right foot upon the sea, that is, he subdued the Mediterranean powers. And finally, after 40 years, he places his left foot on the earth, the European powers. So this is the wonderful imagery of the apocalypse in relation to the work of Christ and the saints in establishing the kingdom. And part of what they have to do, of course, is to reshape the land as the inheritance given to Abraham and his seed. Now, there just happens to be a fault line that runs west to east through the Mount of Olives on a line south of the temple. So here's your fault line. And in fact, it passes under what's called the Church of All Nations, which will be one of the first things to go down the Gurgler. Okay, so this is already there, provided by God. And of course, the very great earthquake that divides the Mount of Olives, with half of that mountain going towards the north and half toward the south, creates a very great valley, we read. Well, we're going to have a look at that valley. It's very important in the scheme of things. So here's a cross-section of the land as it is today. So you see, we've got this high point of the land. Hebron, in fact, is the highest point, 3,300 feet. Jerusalem is 3,000 feet. But you've got the Dead Sea, which is 1,300 feet below sea level. So there's a massive difference between the heights of the mountains of Israel and, of course, the depths of the Dead Sea. It's all got to change, brothers and sisters. And what Zechariah chapter 14 is talking about is that change. Shall be in that day, verses 8 and 9, that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea. Now, the former sea here, of course, is the sea toward the east, because the directions are always given with you facing the east. So the former sea here is the Dead Sea, and of course the hinder sea, half of them towards the hinder sea, is the Mediterranean Sea, to one who is looking east. It's behind him, okay? And Yahweh shall be king over all the earth. And in that day there shall be one Yahweh, and his name one. So what that's telling us is this, is a cross-section of the land after the earthquake. So this is what it looks like today. You've got the heights of Hebron and Jerusalem, the depths of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea will become a living sea. It will be raised above sea level because the water is going to flow northwards in the future, and I'll point that out in a minute. So this is the way that the mountains of Israel will be reshaped. And you see these lines running down here, that's actually the slope of the Arabah. So this up here is the plateau that will be formed, and the temple will be on the lip, on the rim of that plateau. And falling away from that will be this plain that is formed by the great earthquake. A lot of that rock and dirt and soil that's now around the area of Hebron will end up in the Jordan Valley, bring the height up above sea level so that the water will flow back in the other direction. And Mount Zion will be exalted, and there it is there, of course, in illustration. And we read in Psalm 48 verse 2, beautiful for situation. The Hebrew word actually means elevation. Beautiful for elevation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, from which, of course, direction you cannot see it today. It will be the city of the great king. So Zechariah 14 verse 10 then goes on to say this, all the land shall be turned as a plain. Now that word plain is actually the Hebrew word Arabah. It means a plain, but it can mean a desert. It's used of the Jordan Valley, for example, that word. So it shall be turned as a plain from Geba. Now Geba is 10 kilometres or 6 miles to those in North America, 6 miles north of Jerusalem, from Geba to Rimmon. Rimmon is 33 miles southwest of Jerusalem. So all this land is turned to a flat plain, and it shall be lifted up, that is Jerusalem, shall be lifted up in her place from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananeel unto the king's wine presses. Now just take a little note of some of those places described there, like the Tower of Hananeel, for example. We're going to see a reference in Jeremiah in a moment that speaks of the same thing, and it gives us some of the proportions of this temple. Well, of course, when it says, and it shall be lifted up, it's talking about the exaltation of Mount Zion. Now, this is what it will look like when looking down from above in that day. So we have the great sea, or the hinder sea. We've got the former sea over here. And we've got, of course, the reshaping of this land. Because what's going to happen is that when this central massif of the land, the mountains of Israel, are, as it were, flattened, and most of this rock and soil that's down here ends up in the Jordan Valley, what will happen is that you'll have this situation where the current Dead Sea becomes a sea of life. And in actual fact, if you can follow the blue, see the blue going up here, the water is actually going to flow out, as we were told in Zechariah 14, into the sea, into the Mediterranean. So it's going to go back in the opposite direction to what it flows today. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because of the parable of the river Jordan. Jordan, the descender, is the parable of human life. It comes from the waters of Hermon, the snows of Hermon, which come into the Sea of Galilee, which is teeming with life, and then it follows the serpentine course down to the Dead Sea where nothing lives. And it passes on the way a city called Adam. See? That's the problem, isn't it? That's how we all go. We go through Adam to the Dead Sea. Well, it's all going to be changed in the kingdom age. The land itself will teach important lessons. And so the water will flow back through the city of Adam. Because what God has done through Christ and will do for the next 1,000 years of his reign is to reverse that process and to end the curse upon man. So this is the marvellous things that will happen here. Now, I want you to take notice of this place down here. This is on the plain. It's Yahweh Shema. We're going to talk about Yahweh Shema as we proceed in our studies, and we're going to see how important that is to mortal worshippers. It will look like this. This is of course, this is on the back wall of this room. This is an artist's impression. Sister Bernice Essex painted this, and you can see that the exalted Mount Zion is up here. You've got the temple, and we've got this slope, and then we've got this Arabah, this plain, which we've been looking at. It's pretty close to what we would expect to see in the future. So let's then have a bit of a look at inheritance. We've seen the reshaping of the land. It's very important. Let's have a look now at inheritance in this land. I want you to come to Isaiah 65, because this is a reference to the inheritance that Yahweh provides for his people Israel. This is the mortal population of the land in Isaiah 65. And we read, of course, of a new heavens and a new earth in verse 17. And the new heavens is the government of Christ and the saints. The new earth, of course, is a populace who will be responsive in that day. So that's why it's a new heavens and a new government and a new responsive people as a result of the divine judgments that have swept the earth clean of all of the carnalities and rubbish of man. We read about that in verse 17 of Isaiah 65. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind. So the things that are so important to man today, all their stuff, their celebrities, their achievements, all that will be forgotten. We'll be in a new era entirely, a totally new era. And so it goes on to say in verses 18 and 19 that Jerusalem will be a rejoicing, and Israel a joy to all peoples. In verse 20, we find that mortal longevity is greatly increased. It says, there shall no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old. Now, think about that, Someone who dies at age 100 and that age will be considered a kid. Oh, poor fellow. He was only a child when they're burying him. Well, people are going to live for hundreds of years, maybe going back to the times of the pre-flood era, the times of Methuselah, for example. Verses 21 and 22 talk about them building houses and planting vineyards without fear of plunder by enemies. And verse 23 says they will not labour in vain or produce offspring for trouble, because that's what people do today, don't they? They're labouring in vain because what they're trying to build is going to be destroyed very shortly or taken away from them in the terrible events that will transpire when we are removed in the time of trouble such as never was. Yeah, it'll be taken away from them. And of course they bring forth children for what purpose? Most of them for trouble. So that's not going to happen in this era. It's all going to be different. And they will be in harmony, of course, with Yahweh, which is why they will receive these blessings. It says in verse 24, it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. What does that infer to you? God doesn't answer people who are wicked and corrupt. It means that this people are changed. And so God is there for them. And of course, when it says that he will be there for them, brothers and sisters, just remember that means you and me. God won't personally do that. Christ will send agents to deal with these people in the land and outside the land. That's you and me. That's our prospective work in the future. And of course, it then speaks about violence being eradicated from the land and indeed from the whole earth. So there's the inheritance of Israel. So here's the inheritance promised to Abraham, where the tribes of Israel will be settled. The land will be divided into equal cantons or divisions of equal width, running parallel east and west. And it's a very fascinating thing, of course, that when you look at the land, it is designed in a way that you and I probably wouldn't design it. It's bounded north and south by the Euphrates and the Nile. We read that from Genesis 15, verse 18. And from sea to sea, Mediterranean, to the Persian Gulf, from Psalm 72, verse 8. Now here's the resettlement of the 12 tribes. And over each tribe, one of the apostles will rule as a priest. But we've just read in Ezekiel 45, verses 1 to 8, about this section of the land, the Holy Oblation, and we'll come to that in due time. But north of the Holy Oblation, this is the area of Christ and his saints, and of the temple, which is right there, there are 7 tribes to the north, beginning with Judah, going up to Dan. And there are 5 tribes to the south. Why would you do that? Why not have 6 above and 6 below the Holy Oblation? Well, you see, this is Abraham's land. And the promises to Abraham have a number. God made 7 promises to Abraham, did he not, in the course of a lifetime? The first of those has 7 clauses, and the last one is filled with 7s. 7 is the Abrahamic covenant number. And of course what God is saying is, if you want to be in this land with Abraham, then you can be here on the same basis as him, on the basis of faith. But it will be because I'm shown grace. That's why you have 5 below. 5 is the divine number for grace. So this land is inherited by people who are in Abraham by divine grace. That's what he's teaching, just in the very structure of the way the tribes are settled. 7 above and 5 below. Yep, that's the basis. An inheritance in the land depends on belief in the Abrahamic promises and divine grace. So this is how the tribes will be settled. This is the message of Ezekiel 48 and 47. This is what we read in that 48th chapter of Ezekiel. There's the 7 above, Judah, right up to Dan, and then you've got Benjamin, south of the Holy Oblation, right down to Gad, who's in the far south of the land. And we're going to see why this is important a little later on, because you see, God knows the heritage of all of these Jews who will end up in this land in that day. Now, obviously there's been a lot of mixing up and confusion over time, but God knows which tribe they actually belong to. And that's the area of the land that they are going to have to inherit or inhabit. They're not going to be able to pick and choose. So if you belong to Dan, you can't pick down here. You can't go down to Gad. You can't take over Judah. You can't go to Judah's inheritance. You stay up in the inheritance given to the tribe of Dan. It's as simple as that. Now that's important because that's not the situation with another class of people we want to talk about at the end of this study. It's quite a different situation for them. Now the Holy Oblation is here between the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. Joseph, of course, receives a double portion, and Levi's inheritance is in the Holy Oblation, as we shall see. He doesn't have a portion of the land apart from what they get in the centre of the Holy Oblation. So here it is. This is what was being described. If you come back to Ezekiel chapter 45, this is what was being described in that section that we read. It says in verse 1, "Moreover, when ye shall divide by lot the land for inheritance, ye shall offer an oblation." So that's how we get this idea of holy oblation. Oblation simply means a present. The Hebrew word teruma means a present. It is used of the heave offering, for example, something presented to Yahweh. So it's an oblation unto Yahweh, and holy portion of the land. The length shall be the length of 25,000 reeds. Now, I think I recalled it in the reading from the translation that was being used for the reading, that it was cubits. Well, that's not correct. Okay, cubits is not correct. It should be reeds. And we're going to see the difference. There's a massive difference between reeds and cubits. And there are places where the translators have put cubits and they should have put reeds. Okay, we'll find out those as we proceed. So if we have here 25,000 reeds, then this is an area 56 miles square, because it is square. So 56 miles approximately, or very close to that, or 90 kilometres for those who use the metric system. So 56 miles square holy oblation, and it's divided up into 3 parts, as we're going to see. Now it occupies nearly all of Judah's ancient territory. And that's important. You know why? Because in Zechariah 2, we read, in verse 12, that Yahweh will inherit Judah. Yeah, so Yahweh, the holy oblation given to him, is actually in Judah's ancient inheritance. Yahweh inherits Judah, and Judah is shuffled north, pushed north of where they used to be in the land. So that's why we have this area taken over by God, as it were. Now it has, of course, a purpose. It's set apart for divine worship. Zechariah 2:12, divided into profane section. Now by profane, we don't mean, there's no evil intent in the word profane. It simply means common. So a common area. So profane or common, holy area, and a most holy area. So there are 3 sections to it, as you can see. The southern section, this is the common area, is for the city Yahweh Shema. housing the worshippers who will come to worship in the temple, which is up here, on the border between the portion of the sons of Zadok and the portion of the Levites. The central section is for the Levites, the mortal priests, who will do most of the hard and bottom end labours of the temple. You know, the stuff that you give to the lower order of priests. We'll go into that a little later on as well. Whereas the section to the north, the holy portion of the sons of Zadok, is for the immortal priests. Now, east and west of the holy oblation, you have a portion. You have what's called the western residue and the eastern residue, which goes for a long way. In fact, it goes out, I think, to the Persian Gulf. So, what's this portion for? Well, it's called, in Ezekiel 45, verse 7, the prince's portion. As we read that, didn't we? Look at verse 7 of Ezekiel 45. And a portion shall be for the prince on the one side and on the other side of the oblation of the holy portion. See, so it's unmistakable. It's telling us that this is the portion given to Yahweh, but this portion to the west and this portion to the east is given to the Lord Jesus Christ. So what's he going to do with that, do you think? What do you think Christ is going to do with this portion of land? Far too big for one, isn't it? Well, he's not going to have it for himself, because he's going to give a portion of that to the saints, brothers and sisters. That's where our inheritance is going to be in the land promised to Abraham. Not amongst the tribes. Our inheritance is going to be to the west or to the east of the holy oblation. Now let's dig down in some detail, shall we? Let's get your grey matter working here. I want you to come to Ezekiel chapter 46 and verses 16 and 17. Ezekiel 46 verse 16 says this: Thus saith Adonai Yahweh, if the prince give a gift unto any of his sons, the inheritance thereof shall be his sons. It shall be their possession by inheritance. But if he give a gift of his inheritance to one of his servants, then it shall be his to the year of liberty. After it shall return to the prince. But his inheritance shall be his sons for them. Now we're going to go through those two verses and see what they mean to you and me. So, sons and servants are differentiated in this passage. And clearly, from what we've just read, sons are superior to servants. Now what would you call yourself today? Well, you'd call yourself a servant of Christ, wouldn't you? Yes, and that's what I am. We are servants of Christ. But we're also sons. We'll show you that. We're also called sons. And there's going to be a difference between servants and sons in the kingdom age. Because once we're immortalized, brothers and sisters, we cease to be servants. Cease to be servants in the ultimate sense of that word. We're going to be regarded as sons, and more than that, as kings and priests. We need to come to grips with that. The saints are said to be the children of Abraham in Galatians 3 verse 7, of the patriarchs in Acts 13 verses 32 and 33, of Paul in 1 Corinthians 4 verses 14 to 17, and of the Apostle John in 1 John 2 verse 1 and 3 John verse 4, where he talks about his sons in the faith. Not unusual language, is it, for the saints to be called sons? Jesus referred to the disciples as his children or sons in Mark chapter 2 verses 18 and 19 and John 13 and verse 33. We are described as the children which God has given Christ in Hebrews chapter 2 verses 10 to 14, which is a citation, by the way, from Isaiah 8 verse 18 about the sons of the prophet Isaiah. Behold, he says, I and the children that Yahweh hath given me, they liken to Christ and the saints. He calls us, brothers and sisters, as it were, his children. And Isaiah 53, of course, reinforces that. He shall see a seed. He shall see his children, so to speak, that his work has redeemed. So verse 16, we read here in Ezekiel 46, Christ's sons have a permanent inheritance in the land, which cannot be taken away. That's not the case of those who are described here as servants. So in verse 17, by contrast, his servants forfeit any gift of land from the prince in the year of release. So clearly, the servants are mortals, though privileged mortals, of course, but they're not sons. So this is all based on a precedent. It's the precedent that was set in the land of Egypt in the time when Joseph ruled the land of Egypt. So it comes from Genesis 47, verses 20 to 22. So why don't we go there? Let's come back to Genesis chapter 47. So what we've just read in Ezekiel 46, verses 16 and 17 is actually based on what happens back here in Genesis 47. And we know what happens. We've got Joseph, of course, in the time of famine, feeding Egypt and the nations around. And the Egyptians run out of money. So he says, well, I'll take your cattle. I ran out of cattle. He says, well, I'll buy your land. I ran out of land. I'll buy your person. So he buys everything for Pharaoh, who in the type, of course, is the type of Yahweh. This is Joseph representing Christ in his rulership in the kingdom age. And he buys up everything for Pharaoh, in the first instance, representing Yahweh. So let's just read then from verse 20 of Genesis 47. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of the borders of Egypt even to the other end thereof. Only the land of the priests bought he not. The land of the priests. So what's this word priests then? Well, here it is. It's the Hebrew word kohen. It means a priest, but it could also mean a principal officer, a prince, or a chief ruler. The first occurrence is in Genesis 14, verse 18, right? Yeah, Melchizedek, priest of the Most High God. But you find it also used, rendered this way, chief rulers. You find the word in Job 12, verse 19, rendered princes. That's why in the margin of my Bible it says, for the word priests, the alternative is princes. So what are they? Well, they are princes and priests. What does that mean? It means they are king priests, does it not? Yes, this is the type for the saints in the kingdom. Joseph is the type of Christ as the ruler of the whole earth, right? And he has these princes with him. Now when they have a need for food, they don't have to give up their land. See what it says here? Verse 22, only the land of the priests or princes bought he not, for the priests or princes had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their lands. Now this is emphasised in verse 26. Look at verse 26. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day that Pharaoh should have the fifth part. Fifth part? Yeah, it's all about divine grace. Except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. In other words, brothers and sisters, when Christ gives you and me, by the grace of God, an inheritance to the west or to the east of the holy oblation, it will never be taken from you for eternity. Not so with the tribes of Israel, the mortal people, the tribes of Israel. They will have to give it back at the year of release, and it will be given back to them, and they give it back, and they give it back, right through the millennium. Why? Well, because they're not permanent inhabitants until they've been made immortal. And that's only going to happen for them at the end of the 1,000 years. All of this is prefigured here in the life and work of Joseph. So this is the summary. As we come back to Ezekiel chapter 45, this is the summary of what we've been talking about here. The inheritance of the saints in the land. Now there's the passage I'm going to highlight at the base of this slide, Ezekiel 45 and verse 4. So we've looked at the Holy Oblation in the early verses of this chapter. So come to verse 4. The holy portion of the land shall be for the priests, the ministers of the sanctuary, which shall come near to minister unto Yahweh. Now, I'm going to stop there, because in one of our studies we're going to consider the priesthood. There's two orders of priests. There's the immortal priests, the saints, and there's the lower order of priests, the Levites, mortal Levites. Now, the mortal Levites do not come near unto Yahweh. The only priests that can come near to Yahweh, which means, of course, to go into the most holy, to come near the altar, which is in the centre of the most holy, the only priest that can do that is the immortal priests, the sons of Zadok. So that's what it's referring to here. This is not the lower class of priests. This is the higher order of priests. So what does the end of verse 4 tell us about them? And it says, it shall be a place for their houses, and an holy place for the sanctuary. So what is being referred to here is this top portion of the Holy Oblation. There's the Holy Oblation, this green top portion on our illustration. This is the holy portion of the sons of Zadok. What we're being told is that they have houses here. Now their inheritance is west or east, but they have why would they have houses there, do you think? Well, because you see, they're going to come and serve in the temple, which is down here on the southern border of their portion of the Holy Oblation. Now, I'll tell you what these houses won't have. They will not have kitchens. They will not have bedrooms. They will not have bathrooms. All right? They'll have nothing that's necessary for mortal life. That will be provided down here in Yahweh Shema for mortal worshippers who will need kitchens and bathrooms and bedrooms. But saints don't need any of that. So these houses are places where they can simply meet with others, other immortal saints. This is the place where you might end up having in your house, your little place, people like Abraham or David or the other multitude of saints that you will catch up with during the course of 1,000 years. This is the place where you'll sit down together. And you can do that 24/7, as they say, in the modern world. Because you won't need to sleep. You won't need to eat. You probably will, because saints can. But you won't need to. And you won't need to go to bed because you're tired. At the end of a long day of conversation, you'll be ready to go on and on and on until you've called up for duty in the temple. Other times, of course, you're going to be elsewhere throughout the world, administering in the area of people that will be under your administration and control. And your duty there will be both to guide and govern and, most importantly, to educate. But there will be times when saints will be brought to this place and they'll have things to do here in this house of prayer for all nations. So let's just summarise. There's the temple. When serving in the land, the saints will dwell in that portion. Immortals, the prince seeks to honour, will inherit in the prince's portion, west and east. We've seen that from Ezekiel chapter 45, verses 7 and 8. We have that prince's portion that we considered, where he's going to give an inheritance to his saints in the kingdom age. Well, I want to conclude this first study by turning now to the inheritance of our children. Now, this is important to me. I happen to have 12 grandchildren. The oldest is 19, not yet baptised, but hopefully soon. And they go right down to 3 years of age. And if Christ comes when I think he's going to come, they're still going to be very young. So what's the destiny of my grandchildren, of your grandchildren, and if you happen to be parents, what's the destiny of your children? Well, it's very plain, it's very clear. And it's one of the most moving things in the whole book of Ezekiel. We're going to find this in Ezekiel chapter 47. But firstly, I want you to just consider a couple of passages. Very quickly, come to Psalm 68. We won't be here long. This is a psalm, of course, which is about the events of Armageddon and beyond. It's the time when when David took the ark up to Zion, and he saw that as the saints coming ultimately to the exalted Zion through the earthquake, he saw then the 40 years of conflict that would follow that. It's all in Psalm 68. But the passage I want is quite a remarkable thing. In a psalm that deals with divine judgment, this is what we read in verse 5. A father of the fatherless and a judge of the widows is God in his holy habitation. God setteth the solitary in families. He bringeth out those which are bound with chains, but the rebellious dwell in a dry land. And then he goes on to speak about how he brought Israel out of Egypt as the pattern for what's going to happen in the latter days. He brought the parents and the children. He's going to do the same again. And in fact, there's even going to be people there that are called fatherless. Interesting, isn't it? He's a judge, but he cares for the fatherless and the widow. Now the next passage I want you to come to is Isaiah 40. Because Isaiah 40, verses 9 to 11, also speaks eloquently about where our children are going to end up in the divine scheme of things. Now we know, of course, that Isaiah 40 was the basis of John the Baptist's preaching in the first century. And therefore, you could argue that the context is about the first century. But a little careful reading will show you that when we read from verse 9 onwards, it's not about the first century. It's about the 21st century. Verse 9 says, O Zion that bringest good tidings, get thee up into the high mountain. O Jerusalem that bringest good tidings, lift up thy voice with strength. Lift it up, be not afraid. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Well, up to that point you could say, well, that could apply, couldn't it, to Christ coming on the scene. He came into the land of Judea. It could apply to that. It doesn't. You know why? It was the next verse. The next verse says this. Behold, Adonai Yahweh will come with a strong hand, and his arm shall rule for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. That tells you it's about the second advent of Christ. It's about the time when he comes to bring judgment. His work is before him, and he comes with rewards for his saints. He didn't do that in his first advent, did he? He came to be crucified. So this is about his second advent. So read on to verse 11. This is about Christ. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom. Now, it doesn't mean four-legged lambs, does it? Christ's not going to go around carrying four-legged lambs. It's about him looking after the children, caring for the children of his people. He goes on to say, he shall gently lead those that are with young. There are going to be sisters who, when the angels come knocking on their door, will be pregnant. But not, still months away from giving birth. There are going to be people like that. He's going to care for them too. There'll be mothers with young children, very young children at that time. He's going to care for them too. So come then to Ezekiel chapter 47. Because here's the third passage that deals with our children in the future. It speaks about an inheritance prepared and given to the children. This is what it says in Ezekiel 47. And we're going to read from verse 21. So shall ye divide this land unto you according to the tribes of Israel. So what precedes it in chapter 47 is the division of the land amongst the tribes of Israel. Then verse 22 says, And it shall come to pass that ye shall divide it by lot for an inheritance unto you, and to the strangers that sojourn among you. I want you to notice the language. Strangers, what does that mean? Well, they're Gentiles, for a start. They're not Jews. So the strangers that sojourn. Sojourn, you only do that when you haven't got a permanent residency. Okay, so these are not immortals, as we're going to see. Because it also says they shall beget children among you. And we know that immortals will not even have the capacity to bring forth children. That's gone. So this has got to be mortal people who beget children among you. And it says, And they shall be unto you as born in the country among the children of Israel. Now this can't just be any people, can it? It's got to be a special people. And you're going to see they are a special people. Yes, they are a special people. They're the children of Christadelphian families. who were too young to be held responsible or accountable at the coming of Christ. Young children, maybe teenagers will be involved. Children of that ilk. And if one of their parents goes into the kingdom, they will have an inheritance in the land of Israel, among the tribes of Israel. It says, and they shall have inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. That's pretty good stuff, isn't it? It says they sojourn, but they're counted as Israelites. They sojourn, but they are counted as born in the country. As good as being born in the country. Well, there's something else here. Because the next verse says this, but it shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger sojourneth, there shall ye give him his inheritance, saith Adonai Yahweh. Now, the Jews who are in these 7 tribes to the north of the Holy Oblation, and these tribes, the 5 of them to the south, they can't do this. If you belong to Gad, you can't say, well, look, I don't like this place here, I'm going to go and get into Benjamin's territory. Sorry. If you belong to Gad, you stay where Gad's got his inheritance. Simple as that. But not these people. These people can settle anywhere among the 7 tribes to the north, anywhere among the 5 tribes to the south. So who could they be? To be that privileged? Well, it's pretty obvious who they are. They're the children of Christadelphian parents. And Brother Roberts believed that. This is what he wrote in the Ambassador, Volume 3, page 185. As to the children who may be alive when the Lord returns and sends for the members of his household, the question is, will not provision be made for the household of the faithful? If we are to judge from the deity's operations in the past, we are justified in expecting that this will be so. Respect has always been shown to the kindred of those who have been the objects of divine regard. Noah's family is one instance, Lot's family another. His sons-in-law were, by command of the angels, invited to escape the impending judgment, but laughed the invitation to scorn. Rahab's family was spared from the destruction that befell Jericho. Is it not possible that similar favour will be shown when the greatest judgment of all arrives? Is it not possible that households may be invited to accompany the saints eastward? As a matter of course, the saints alone are called to judgment, and they alone enter the kingdom of God in the sense of obtaining the life, honour and glory of it. But mortal subjects will have to be provided for as well as kings and priests. And is it not possible the saints may have a commission to secure among these a place for such of their kindred as shall have to leave home and country for the seat of the new power, there to shelter in the king's refuge until the judgment is overpast, and afterwards to settle among the tribes of Israel as strangers sojourning in the land, to whom a portion will be divided. He quotes Ezekiel 47 verse 22. If so, all difficulty about the children would be at an end. Now, a very brief timeline. I haven't got time to take you to this passage, but this is what's going to happen, brothers and sisters. There will be 1 year of judgment. You can prove that from Exodus chapter 40. There will be 1 year of rejoicing with the bride to fulfill Deuteronomy 24 verse 5. No one's ever done that, by the way, in history. But Christ will, because it's about him. He will spend a year rejoicing with his bride. There will be a 4.5 year period of preparation, the last work of the angels to prepare the saints for the work they had to do for the next 40-something years. And then 3.5 years prior to Armageddon, Elijah and many saints will begin their work among the Jews outside the land. And then, of course, there are other things to happen prior to Armageddon. The subjugation of the Sinaitic Arabs and, of course, the smiting and healing of Egypt has to begin. So there is the pattern of the 10 years from the resurrection of the dead to Armageddon. Now, what about children? Here's a timeline for Christadelphian children. Let us say Christ comes in late 2017. Let's hope he does. And a baby is born to a Christadelphian family in early 2017. That child will be nearly 2 years old when its parents are immortalised. Aged 10 at Armageddon, aged 50 at the opening of the temple for worship. So 10 at Armageddon, about here, somewhere in their 30s, maybe, who knows, they will marry and start their own family. After Armageddon, of course, once the land has been cleansed, they're going to be taken there and they can make a decision about where they're going to settle amongst the tribes of Israel. They'll start their own family. When the temple is open for service, they'll be around 50 years of age. And they'll be able to bring their children up to the temple to meet their grandparents. Their immortal grandparents. Won't that be a terrific day? Well, it isn't too far away, brothers and sisters. In our next study, God willing, we're going to have a look at entering in by the east gate. We're going to have a look at a little bit of detail about the structure, proportions of the house, more importantly, about where we'll be when Christ and the saints enter into that east gate.